to the channel with Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist. I don't practice as a preacher anymore. The call went off my life. I accepted that and gave it away. Just want you to think for a minute about the new supply. It's not your concern, but if you are concerned, just think for a minute. Just want you to think. Think of the condition the person was in when you met them. Think where their life was at, where they were up to with their children, or if they didn't have any children, just where they were up to in general. And think whether that's improved or going to change since you've been discarded or you discarded that person. Then think for a minute why you discarded that person. Was it the first time? What caused it? And what makes you think that that person is going to be any different in the next form of supply that they find? Think about the relationships that they told you about. What happened to them? Were they used, abused, robbed from? I guess in a way that fucking well sounds like myself, to be honest. Because this is what you can get into these days. All sorts of dysfunction and stuff. Was there resolve? How did they manage it? What was their attitude? I guess if they're showing you pictures of their old boyfriend, they're still in love with him. And usually if you discard someone, they'll try and go back to whoever that was. Which doesn't matter as long as you're building yourself. See, what's happened is if you've genuinely tried your best, and that doesn't just mean turning up, that means dealing with unresolved, dealing with things that are trying to fucking ruin the relationship, like interferers, family members, children, exes, all these things that these people will allow, you shouldn't allow. If you've genuinely done your best, you played a proper part, then what do you need to be concerned about? If the trouble was coming from the person that you were with, really, and you've discarded them, what do you need to be worried about? Besides nothing. This is what I don't understand about people. You break up with somebody, you don't worry about that person anymore. You go through your healing process. You stay focused on what you've got to do. You process the situation and examine yourself for what it was. You don't get blindsided by your faithfulness and loyalty. You figure out what the issue was, and in my last two cases it was covert emotional incest, which probably led to an external emotional affair. There would have been somehow or other there was somebody else in the mix somewhere. I didn't care, so I don't know how all that worked, but there was something going on somewhere. This usually happens because they have to self-soothe outside the relationship. If they're not willing to fix the problem within the relationship, that will wear at them. They will turn on the relationship by self-soothing, but they'll do it outside the relationship. But they'll do this covertly. They'll stay physically in, they're mentally out, and monkey branching or trying to find a way to monkey branch into something else. They're probably hostile verbally towards a relationship with the adult child or children. And this is glorious for them because they want the relationship over. And you'd be picking up all this oppression coming off this in the back of your mind. Now, this is where people get sick. Their minds get tired. A lot of people can get really sick from this kind of psychological assault, emotional attack and abuse. because it's all covert. If you're in a relationship and somebody's not willing to fix it, my advice from my experience, and I've tried every different way that you can think of to get resolve out of people that just aren't going to, just get out straight away, because these people are not going to fix the problem. Like in my world, if there's a problem and it gets brought to my attention, I fix it straight away. I'm not going to be a problem to the person that I'm with. So if you're in a relationship with someone and they're not fixing the problem, then they are the problem. You need to understand this. Just because you're in a relationship with somebody doesn't mean they're not a problem. It does not mean they're not a problem. And this is where our faithfulness and loyalty blind us from the decisions that we need to make. Sometimes we just get a turn with a person. It's not the way we plan it. It goes against the grain, probably against the way that we're raised. But you don't know what that person's true life journey's been like before you come along. I've met women that have been spoiled and you're never going to get resolved. I've met women that have been abused and you're never going to get resolved. I've met religious women that are just religious women and you're never going to get resolved. So you get to the point where you just go, well, what do you see? Without resolve, the relationship's failed, because unresolved is an indication of the person's value towards the relationship. And if the problem's not being resolved, particularly if it's triangulation, then that person has more value for what's going on within the triangulation than what's going on in the relationship. Do you understand that? They're a split personality. They don't know how to build on anything significant. And the reason why I'm doing this talk, actually, it's just come back to mind. I was listening to some talks on covert emotional incest and the lengths that these children and parents will go to protect their emotionally incestual connection. A lady was just saying that in one of her talks, that they'll go so far as supplying drugs. The mother will go so far as supplying drugs, and the children will go so far as supplying drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and all the other shit and garbage they're using to kill themselves, as a way of confirming their devotion to one another. Which means if the mother took the drugs out of the situation, she's sending the message that the relationship's not as important to her as what it was. So these covert emotional relationships can cycle around or be co-joined with alcohol, drugs, nicotine, medications. And this is really interesting because a lot of unhealthy relationships are built on supply, not supply of sex, that just comes normally, but supply of drugs and all this other stuff as well, and alcohol and things. They confirm the relationship through the supply, which leads to destruction. But that's how it is, because a lot of these triangulated situations are destructive anyway. You know where it's all going to end up. Everyone's just going to be infantile and useless. And be careful of these people and their food. Right, they'll bring food as a way of trying to say they're in the relationship, but they're not. Emotionally, they're not. If you're in a relationship with a partner and you're not allowed to go to their place, I can tell you right now, get the hell out straight away. There's something seriously wrong. And you'll never know unless you're a fly on the wall to what extent. And not that you give a shit. I didn't give a shit. So these people, they haven't got the right intention. They don't know how to build a solid, substantial relationship that really means anything or goes anywhere. They live in a world of a lack of trust. They really don't even trust each other. And you'll see their loyalties will shift to the people that they're trying to have a relationship with, back to the parent, back to the child, and the person on the outsider will usually get the raw end of the straw. But if people can be educated on covert emotional incest, I'm afraid that there'd be a lot of lonely mothers and children. It's just that people haven't got the education of it. They don't understand it, what it means and how it works and all that stuff. To me, it's one of the most vicious and malicious, psychologically damaging forms of relationship assault. It's ruthless, it's relentless, it's cunning, it won't give in. Of the ones I've seen, there's been no sign at all of it ever relenting. These people will try and split just enough to keep you interested, but still feeding the enmeshment. I have no sympathy for these people, and I know where they're going to end up. They're going to end up on their own or just sitting together. How embarrassing, a mother and a son, like two infantile children, just wrecked everything they've ever had, including themselves. And as I said, they will supply nicotine, alcohol, drugs, medications, amphetamines, cocaine, all this sort of stuff between each other to try and numb the pain, but they'll never ever fix anything, because the problem's their enmeshment, the problem's between themselves. And if you're in life and you're trying to do the work to be a decent person without all that, right, don't worry about the sex. Don't worry about all that. I've never had a partner that hasn't been able to give good sex. As a matter of fact, the emotional incest ones were the most hopeless. Absolutely hopeless. Still, you get through it, and but there's much brighter opportunities out there once you do the discard or get. 9 times out of 10, you won't be discarded. They'll bring up a situation where either they'll cause a discard, which is a reverse discard, where they drive you to the point deliberately for you to get rid of them. They're finished with you. Or where you're just driven to the point and you've decided that the best thing to do is get rid of them. You just want to get rid of them. That's how it works. One thing's for sure, it's not going to last. If you've got any foresight and you can see beyond sex, because a lot of people, these ones just try to hold you with sex, which is really embarrassing when you're watching it and you're just going, oh my God, this is absolutely quite hopeless. There's not much hope for them, to be honest. If the universe has offered them an opportunity to have a good, healthy relationship, and they've squandered that through their choices to remain in unresolved and in drug-induced states and in meandering to each other's infantile emotional lusts, as it were. They go back probably worse than what they were before you come along. More lonely, more drunk, more medicated, more stoned, and more affected by the child or the child by the parent. They get used, ran through, and don't care. They don't care. This is the way that it ends up. And they just take whatever they can get. Don't be that way. Heal, learn, renew, rebuild, stand by your values, heal, recover, and wait on the Lord. Let the Holy Spirit do His work in you. If you've done the right thing and you've tried as best as you can, just wait. Just wait. That's all you have to do. If you can be comfortable with yourself, come back to yourself, settle your mind, let your mind settle, accept that it didn't work, it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't right, that person went, or you had to let them go. They've driven you around the bend, you've driven them around the bend. Stop being selfish and let it go. Your loyalty and your faithfulness was not as important as you thought. Neither was theirs, because she didn't have the characteristic union to build anything significant. That's why it's ended up the way it has. One's not worse than the other, it just didn't work. Your job is to look at yourself, make sure you're in order, and rebuild, renew, and then grow and go forward. But forget about the person's new supply and whatever's happening there. It's not going to be what you think. They're struggling, they're on drugs, they're on alcohol, they're medicated, they're being used, they're using the other person, they're trying to numb a pain that'll never go away because they're not dealing with things the right way. And they squandered what the universe offered them. They make out they don't waste money, but they do. They've wasted more money on drugs than what they have on alcohol. No different to the gambler with the poker machines. They make out money's not important, but it is, and they waste it all on drugs and stuff. Don't worry about what they're doing or what's going on. Focus on yourself. Focus on yourself. Get therapy, get counselling, do whatever you have to do. Make sure you exercise and listen to videos on narcissism and dark triad behaviours and covert emotional. Learn and leave your past behind. Look ahead for the time that you got left. Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist. Bye for now.